Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. The next image I have is it's view of Happy Valley from day 5 of quarantine. How about you describe what the image is of? So somebody listening could be like, oh, okay, they can picture it.
It's really strange. You don't get a view like this a whole lot in Hong Kong. So if you look outside, there's this kind of green field. It looks like a playing field of some sort, quite open, with a bunch of buildings around it from the 70s through the early 2000s, probably. And so you actually get a pretty good perspective of it. But the window down at the bottom is quite dusty, and that's why I chose this image, because you have the city's filth a little bit on the outside of the window that looks like something really beautiful and kind of hazy and misty. And I chose this because it's so bizarre to wake up in this place, which is a place of isolation and, in fact, imprisonment in a way, because if I leave, I could be thrown in prison and fined 25,000 Hong Kong dollars, if I leave this room, right? So it is an enforced quarantine. And it's so beautiful outside, and this place is called Happy Valley. It's the dissonance. It's really striking. Yeah, so that's why I chose that photo. That this is my view every day. I take a different image of it. And tonight is Wednesday, and that's horse racing night, apparently. And they still have the races on, I heard. So I'm going to try and photograph.
Oh, they still do?
I heard that, yeah, on Twitter anyway,
So one of the reasons why I was really hoping to get you on the podcast is because the previous episode was with my sister, who's a physician in Georgia, in the U.S., in Savannah, Georgia. And she found out she had COVID. And then her whole family was tested and they have COVID. And in the U.S., the approach, look, we can't compare Hong Kong, which is a city, to US, which is a country,
nope.
Right? It's not apples to apples. But in Hong Kong, there's a much stricter quarantine response, operational, standard operating procedure, whatever you want to call it. So the image is, let me just go back to it. So the anchor is, okay, so it's essentially the top half of it is the sky with a bit of cloud. The horizon, there's no horizon because it's broken by Hong Kong hillsides. And Hong Kong's hillsides, if you've ever been, are incredible. Essentially, in the summer, it's full-on jungle. And right now, it's a dry season. So it's not quite as green, but still super green. There's this thing in cities, I don't remember what it's called, but essentially what it does is it measures how many skyscrapers there are per or whatever it is. And Hong Kong's has the highest density of skyscrapers, of very tall buildings. And
yes.
So the image that you have, as you say, the bottom is like the filth of it. It makes the bottom of the frame almost sketched. It almost looks like a runny watercolor painting.
Yeah.
And then as it bleeds upward, you see all these small buildings. What you can't see is the race course, which in Happy Valley, as you say, it's a funny title for where you're living. It's a really amazing sight because it's this incredible stretch of perfect green grass, which in Hong Kong is very rare. People don't have lawns.
Extremely valuable as well.
Yes, of course. Yeah, so that's the image. And I'm sure it must be very surreal for you to be in this kind of prison sense. So in the previous episode, we heard about, and I'm totally made fun of my sister, unfairly, but she is my sister.
You did.
So
I love that episode. It was hilarious.
Good. She made it sound like she's really like, the horror. Okay, so that was her experience. Now, why don't you walk listeners through your experience of landing from Istanbul and what it was like to be processed, what it was like for you to land and then to go through the test. I'm assuming testing. So yeah, what was...
Actually, I wanted to start with some of what your sister said, which I thought was fascinating.
Sure.
That whole sense of shame and filth, as though you are untouchable. And I've been feeling that here, honestly, the entire time, since even before arriving. When I was away... So I left on, I believe it was 19th of December, and I returned on it was due to return on the 29th, I believe. With travel time, it was just over a week in Istanbul. However, while I was away, Hong Kong decided to increase the quarantine time from 2 to 3 weeks, which meant I would be a week later for work. And then also, I had 3 flights to try to get home. The first one was canceled. It flew to Hong Kong empty from Istanbul. The second one, they would not allow me or the other Hong Kong passengers to board. They wouldn't let us board, and they wouldn't tell us why. They came up with a lot of lies. So finally, thank goodness, I hope you don't mind me saying, but Qatar Airways was amazing, and they were the 3rd flight, and they finally allowed us to get in, and they were incredibly professional the whole time. All the documents had to be checked, and I've taken 4 COVID tests so far because of this trip. The first before I left for Istanbul, because as a responsible traveler, I felt I needed to make sure I didn't have it, even though it was not required for travel to Turkey. The second, before leaving for Hong Kong, and then because my flights were delayed, I had to take another one at the Istanbul airport. So that was 3, and then 1 on arrival in Hong Kong, and then I will have 2 more before leaving the hotel. So it's like a month for a 1-week trip. Yeah.
Wow.
It's been quite an experience. Then when you arrive in Hong Kong, Hong Kong administration, is so efficient, and it's so, but it is, everybody's wearing PPE. You're treated like pariahs. You're treated, and also, to be honest, I will say people who know me here, some people, early on in the pandemic, there was a lot of righteousness about mask wearing. And of course I wear my mask constantly. However, that has shifted over time to, if you travel, you're being really irresponsible and you're doing bad things. And, this is not leisure travel going through this. You only do this if you really need to be somewhere. And I was going, I'll tell you a little more about that in Turkey, but I was going for someone really special, and I wouldn't have done this for pretty much anybody. But I wanted to see if this collaboration could work. And it was pretty important that I go. So, yeah, there was also that kind of area of, the whole trip being a bit difficult as well. So when you arrive, you're kind of herded through with other passengers and all these things. You're made to wait. You have area to sit in after your test. And it's all incredibly efficient. Everything is checked impeccably from before you leave. Actually, somebody at Qatar Airways, as they were checking my documents for like the 50th time, they said it's as difficult to get to Hong Kong as to get to Pluto. They said Hong Kong is the most difficult country to deal with.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But you know what? They said that was respect, because they know that Hong Kong is really trying to protect its people. So, and I understand that. And, whatever. I feel how I feel about this, but I respect the rules of Hong Kong, and I would never.
Right. No, I understand that.
Yeah, and then you wait, and then you're put in transport, but it's like quarantine transport. So these vans are disinfected after every time, and you're herded into the hotel. And now I'm on a quarantine floor with separate ventilation. Everybody here is in quarantine. I think maybe the rooms are half full. I just had, we have delivery 3 times a day of food. You cannot choose when it is. They just hang it on your door. They knock, and then they get away before you can open it. I give them a minute to do that. And
wow.
Yeah, you really feel dirty, and you know what? We're a biohazard, so I get that.
Hold on. Okay, now, so many words want to come out of my mouth. Okay, 1 second. You're not COVID positive, though.
I have never tested positive yet, but it could.
Okay.
I could, theoretically, because it couldn't, maybe the viral load wasn't high enough or whatever. It's pretty unlikely, but yeah.
Describe how much square feet of space you have, roughly. At least you have a window, but describe the size of your cell.
That's a good question. My cell, yeah. I should call it my cell. 200 square feet. And I thought that's actually pretty big compared to some of the hotels I was looking at in my price range.
Oh, you have to pay yourself.
Yeah. It didn't used to have to be, but then Hong Kong changed that in November. You could no longer do home quarantine. When I booked this trip, it was 14 days home quarantine. I thought, okay, great, that fits in my budget. Then it was hotel quarantine, and then they changed it to 3 weeks. So it's 4 times more expensive than my original budget. Yeah, right? I'm an artist as well. I'm not like some businesswoman. But, you make it. I earn a steady salary, so I can deal with it. So 200 square feet. But like that last photo I sent you was my old flat, which was 150 square feet. And I lived happily in there for 2 years. So I'm used to small spaces. Yeah.
Vent your feelings in terms of, as an artist, and however you want to take this question, interpretation of this forced closure, almost like punishment.
Yeah, and it's not over yet.
Mm-hmm.
It's a deterrent. I think that's a large part of the measure here. It's a deterrent for people to travel frivolously.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the government thought there were a lot of people traveling who perhaps didn't need to and shouldn't have been traveling And that was blamed for an increase of cases. Whether that's right or not, okay, to be honest, I think they were exaggerating on how many imported cases were being brought in. And then they tried a bunch of policies to mitigate. A lot were coming from certain areas of the world, so they made those people stay in forced quarantine, whereas other people could quarantine at home, and it was seen as kind of racist because it's from South Asia, South Africa, those travelers, and then there was just a big mess up. It was a big mess. And then quite recently we had this dance cluster, which was well-to-do. There were over 700 cases, I think, of well-to-do people in Hong Kong who were spreading it quite intensely among one another, and many more than any travelers were coming in, but yet to deflect attention from that, they were again pointing at travelers as an issue. Now, okay, I've worked in the travel industry. I know how it works. It's very destructive to the environment, and I get that. I think we need to rethink travel as an industry. And I will also say that as my position I'm single-ish. I don't have kids. My mom and my family are taken care of back in the States, and I don't have a lot of the worries that most people do. If I need to, I just deal with it, and I really try to just say, okay, my room has windows that open. It's a miracle,
sure.
Because I wasn't expecting that. That would have been really hard for me. I heard that's really difficult. And the windows are really big, and there's open space. So I really try hard to just, okay, this is a crap situation. But who am I to complain? I'm living in a first world country. I have a bachelor's degree, only a bachelor's degree, but I'm so lucky in my life to be here. And also to be in a city that people, I'm sure the government's doing their bit, whatever we may think about that, but it's the Hong Kong people who are making the city safe. And I'm so lucky, like you, to live in a place like this, that people keep one another safe because of their behavior. And that's what I really tried to focus on. However, my collaborator in Athens, who I met in Istanbul, he has a business. He has an art space, a couple art spaces there, and it's suffering. They can't have shows. They can't have openings. I have an art studio here at the JCCAC, the Hong Kong Creative Arts Center. I had workshops planned, all sorts of things, cannot do any of it. However, the Hong Kong government has reduced my rent by 75%. I just try to look at the bright side of things, but I also empathize with other people. Business owners are having it so hard. They're really stuck.
Yeah. It's full on. That's the thing. Hong Kong is probably one of the best places to be during this pandemic. So let's move on to a happier photo. So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes, shooting it raw.